In a world where assumptions can shatter careers and pride comes before the fall, one moment of mockery would expose a truth so shocking that it would forever change how an entire military unit viewed respect, rank, and the quiet power of those who serve in shadows. What happens when a cocky soldier decides to humiliate someone he believes is beneath him, only to discover that the person he's targeting could eliminate threats from distances he couldn't even imagine? This is the story of Lieutenant Sarah Chan, a woman whose unassuming appearance hid skills that made her one of the deadliest snipers in military history, and Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, whose arrogance would teach him the most humbling lesson of his life. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones you least expect, and sometimes respect must be earned the hard way. The morning sun cast long shadows across Fort Braxton as Lieutenant Sarah Chan walked quietly through the bustling military compound. At 28, she moved with a purposeful grace that most people mistook for timidity. Her small frame, standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, often caused others to underestimate her presence in a world dominated by towering soldiers and thunderous voices. Sarah had learned long ago that being underestimated was often her greatest advantage. She carried a simple canvas bag over her shoulder, the contents of which would have surprised anyone who bothered to look closely. Inside were maintenance tools for her rifle, a weapon so precisely calibrated that it could hit targets at distances that seemed impossible to most soldiers. But Sarah never spoke about her work, never bragged about her achievements, and certainly never felt the need to prove herself to anyone who didn't already know her capabilities. The morning briefing was scheduled for 800 hours, and Sarah made her way to the conference room where the latest group of transfer soldiers would be receiving their orientation. She had been asked to attend these meetings as part of her new role as a training coordinator, a position that kept her closer to base operations rather than in the field where her true talents lay. It was supposed to be a quieter assignment, a chance for her to share her knowledge with newer soldiers while taking a break from the intense pressure of active combat missions. As she entered the conference room, Sarah noticed the familiar mix of nervousness and bravado that always accompanied groups of newly transferred soldiers. Some sat quietly, studying their folders and trying to absorb as much information as possible. Others clustered in small groups, sharing stories from their previous assignments and attempting to establish social hierarchies before the real work began. Sarah took a seat near the back of the room, pulled out a notebook, and began reviewing the training schedule she would be helping to implement over the coming weeks. Among the new arrivals, Sergeant Mike Rodriguez stood out like a peacock among sparrows. At 6 feet 2 inches tall with broad shoulders and a voice that seemed to fill whatever room he entered, Mike had the kind of commanding presence that made people notice him immediately. He had served 3 tours overseas and carried himself with the confidence of someone who had seen real combat and lived to tell about it. His uniform was immaculate, his posture perfect, and his handshake firm enough to leave an impression on anyone he met. Mike had arrived at Fort Braxton with impressive credentials. He had been decorated for valor during a firefight in Afghanistan where his quick thinking had saved the lives of 4 fellow soldiers. His marksmanship scores were consistently high, and his leadership abilities had been noted by multiple commanding officers throughout his career. He was used to being respected, used to being listened to, and used to being regarded as one of the elite soldiers wherever he served. As the orientation meeting began, Colonel James Patterson entered the room with his typical no-nonsense demeanor. Patterson was a career military man who had served for over 25 years and had earned the respect of everyone under his command through fair leadership and unwavering dedication to his soldiers' welfare. He began the meeting by welcoming the new transfers and explaining the unique nature of Fort Braxton's mission. Fort Braxton was home to several specialized units, including advanced reconnaissance teams, special operations training programs, and what Patterson referred to as precision specialists. He explained that the base operated under higher security clearances than most installations and that the work conducted there often remained classified long after the soldiers involved had moved on to other assignments. The new transfers would be working alongside some of the military's most skilled operators, and they would be expected to maintain the highest standards of professionalism and discretion. During his presentation, Colonel Patterson introduced several key personnel who would be involved in training and operations. When he mentioned Lieutenant Chan and her role in marksmanship training, Sarah stood briefly and nodded to the group before sitting back down. The introduction was brief and unremarkable, describing her simply as someone who would be helping with weapons training and maintenance protocols. Mike barely paid attention to the introduction. From his perspective, Sarah looked like just another administrative officer, probably someone who had landed a safe training position because she couldn't handle the demands of real military operations. He had worked with plenty of officers who seemed more comfortable behind desks than in the field, and he assumed Sarah fit the same pattern. Her quiet demeanor and small stature reinforced his assumption that she was probably not someone he needed to concern himself with in terms of military capability or professional respect. After the formal presentation ended, the new soldiers were given time to introduce themselves to their colleagues and begin familiarizing themselves with the base layout. Mike immediately gravitated toward the other soldiers who seemed to share his confidence and experience level. He found himself in conversation with several veterans who had also recently transferred to Fort Braxton, and the discussion quickly turned to their previous assignments and notable achievements. Sarah, meanwhile, spent her time reviewing personnel files and preparing for the training session she would be conducting over the following weeks. She preferred to understand each soldier's background and experience level before beginning any instruction, as this allowed her to tailor her approach to their individual needs and learning styles. She noticed Mike's impressive record and made mental notes about his experience level, but she also observed his interactions with other soldiers and sensed the kind of confidence that sometimes crossed the line into arrogance. As the morning progressed, the new transfers were taken on a tour of the base facilities. The group visited the armory, the training ranges, the physical fitness facilities, and various administrative buildings. Sarah joined the tour as a guide, pointing out important locations and explaining protocols that would be relevant to their daily routines. She answered questions about everything from meal schedules to security procedures, demonstrating a thorough knowledge of base operations that impressed some of the newer soldiers. Mike, however, seemed more interested in evaluating the base's capabilities than in listening to what he perceived as basic administrative information. He asked pointed questions about the advanced equipment he observed and made comments that suggested he was already familiar with most of what was being shown to them. When Sarah explained the protocols for accessing certain restricted areas, Mike interrupted to mention that he had worked with similar security systems at his previous assignment and was already familiar with the procedures. During the tour of the shooting ranges, Sarah's demeanor became noticeably more focused and engaged. She explained the different types of training conducted at each facility, from basic marksmanship to advanced precision shooting. The ranges were equipped with targets at various distances, from standard 50-yard pistol ranges to extreme long-distance rifle ranges that extended beyond 800 yards. She mentioned that some training exercises utilized targets at even greater distances, but those sessions were conducted at off-base facilities with more space and specialized equipment. Mike was impressed by the sophistication of the ranges but couldn't resist making comparisons to facilities he had used elsewhere. He described some of his own shooting achievements and mentioned that he had consistently scored expert marksman ratings throughout his career. Several other soldiers in the group seemed impressed by his credentials, and Mike enjoyed the attention his stories generated. Sarah listened politely but didn't contribute to the conversation about shooting accomplishments, which Mike interpreted as either modesty about inferior skills or simple lack of relevant experience. The tour concluded back at the main administrative building, where the new soldiers were given their room assignments and daily schedules. Sarah provided each of them with a training calendar that outlined the various sessions they would be attending over their first few weeks at Fort Braxton. She explained that the training was designed to familiarize them with base-specific protocols and equipment, even if they had extensive experience from other assignments. As the group dispersed to settle into their new quarters, Mike found himself walking near Sarah toward the parking area. He decided to make conversation, partly out of politeness and partly out of curiosity about her role at the base. He asked about her background and how long she had been stationed at Fort Braxton. Sarah provided brief, factual answers without elaborating on the details of her previous assignments or specific duties. Mike interpreted her reserved responses as confirmation of his assumptions about her limited field experience. He began sharing stories from his own combat tours, describing firefights and tactical situations with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely enjoyed recounting his military adventures. Sarah listened attentively and asked appropriate questions, but she didn't offer any comparable stories from her own experience. To Mike, this seemed like further evidence that Sarah's military career had been spent primarily in safe, administrative roles. As they reached the parking area, Mike noticed Sarah walking toward a modest sedan that looked more like a civilian vehicle than something a serious military operator would drive. His own pickup truck, equipped with off-road modifications and military-themed accessories, seemed to reflect a more authentic military lifestyle in his opinion. He made a casual comment about the differences in their vehicles, suggesting with a laugh that Sarah probably didn't need the kind of rugged transportation that real field operators required. Sarah smiled politely at the comment and wished him well as they parted ways. She didn't seem offended by his implied criticism, which Mike took as a sign that she recognized the accuracy of his assessment. As he drove to his new quarters, Mike felt confident that he had correctly identified Sarah as someone who would probably be pleasant to work with but unlikely to challenge his status as one of the more capable soldiers on the base. That evening, Mike joined several other newly transferred soldiers at the base recreation center. The conversation naturally turned to their impressions of Fort Braxton and the personnel they had met during their first day. When Sarah's name came up in discussion, Mike shared his assessment that she seemed nice enough but probably wasn't someone with significant field experience or combat capabilities. He suggested that her training role was probably well suited to her administrative background and that the real instruction would likely come from more experienced operators. The other soldiers seemed to accept Mike's evaluation, partly because his confidence and apparent expertise made him a natural leader within the group. None of them had any reason to question his judgment about Sarah's capabilities, and most of them had formed similar impressions based on her quiet demeanor and unremarkable introduction during the morning briefing. They moved on to discussing other aspects of their new assignment, unaware that their casual dismissal of Lieutenant Sarah Chen would soon prove to be one of the most significant miscalculations of their military careers. Meanwhile, Sarah spent her evening preparing for the next day's training sessions. She reviewed the personnel files of each new soldier, paying particular attention to their experience levels and any areas where additional instruction might be beneficial. She also spent time cleaning and calibrating her personal rifle, a custom-modified weapon that had been her constant companion through missions that remained classified at the highest levels of military intelligence. As she worked with the familiar precision that had made her legendary among those who knew her true capabilities, Sarah reflected on the interesting dynamics she had observed among the new transfers and, particularly on Sergeant Rodriguez's obvious confidence in his own abilities. The next morning arrived with the crisp efficiency that characterized life at Fort Braxton. Sarah arrived at the training facility an hour before the scheduled session, as was her custom. She used the extra time to set up equipment, review weather conditions that might affect shooting accuracy, and prepare the specific lesson plan she had developed for each soldier based on their individual backgrounds and experience levels. Her attention to detail was legendary among those who had worked with her before, though few of the new transfers would appreciate this level of preparation until much later. Mike Rodriguez arrived at the training facility with his usual confidence, carrying his personal rifle in a pristine case and wearing the kind of tactical gear that suggested serious attention to professional appearance. He had spent the previous evening researching Fort Braxton's reputation and had learned that the base was home to some elite units, which only reinforced his determination to establish himself as one of the top performers among the new transfers. He expected the training sessions to be routine confirmations of skills he already possessed, followed by quick integration into more advanced programs. The morning session began in a classroom setting where Sarah reviewed basic safety protocols and range procedures specific to Fort Braxton. Although most of the soldiers had extensive shooting experience, she explained that different facilities often had unique requirements that needed to be understood before live fire exercises could begin. Mike listened with barely concealed impatience, occasionally exchanging glances with other experienced soldiers who seemed to share his view that this preliminary instruction was unnecessarily basic for operators of their caliber. Sarah noticed the restlessness among some of the more experienced soldiers but continued with her methodical approach. She had learned through years of training others that even the most skilled operators could benefit from understanding the specific procedures and safety measures used at a new facility. More importantly, she used these initial sessions to observe each soldier's attitude, attention to detail, and willingness to follow instructions, all of which provided valuable insights into their character and potential areas for improvement. When the group moved to the outdoor shooting ranges, Sarah began with basic marksmanship assessments at standard distances. Each soldier was given the opportunity to demonstrate their shooting skills at targets placed at 50, 100, and 200 yards using their personal weapons. The exercise was designed to establish baseline performance levels and identify any soldiers who might need additional instruction before advancing to more complex training scenarios. Mike performed exactly as his record suggested he would. His shots were consistently accurate, his technique was solid, and his handling of his rifle demonstrated the kind of competence that comes from extensive practice and real-world experience. He completed the assessment quickly and efficiently, achieving scores that placed him among the top performers in the group. Several other soldiers complimented his shooting, and Mike acknowledged their praise with the gracious confidence of someone accustomed to recognition for his skills. While the soldiers completed their assessments, Sarah moved between the shooting positions, observing techniques and taking notes about each individual's performance. She offered occasional suggestions for minor adjustments that could improve accuracy or consistency, but, for the most part, the experienced soldiers performed well within expected parameters. Her feedback was always delivered quietly and professionally, focusing on technical aspects rather than personal criticism or praise. After all the soldiers had completed the standard assessments, Sarah announced that they would conclude the morning session with a demonstration of advanced precision shooting techniques. She explained that the demonstration would illustrate some of the capabilities expected from soldiers who might eventually qualify for specialized roles within Fort Braxton's elite units. The group gathered around the firing line as Sarah began setting up for what she described as a routine long-distance accuracy exercise. Mike watched with professional interest as Sarah prepared her rifle for the demonstration. He noticed immediately that her weapon was significantly different from standard military firearms. The rifle was clearly custom modified with advanced optics, specialized ammunition, and precision adjustments that indicated serious attention to long-range capability. He assumed that the weapon belonged to one of the base's specialized instructors and that Sarah was simply conducting a demonstration with borrowed equipment. Sarah positioned herself at the firing line and began making calculations based on wind speed, temperature, humidity, and target distance. Her movements were efficient and practiced, suggesting familiarity with the complex mathematics required for extreme range shooting. She adjusted her scope with the kind of precision that indicated extensive training in advanced marksmanship techniques, though her quiet demeanor gave no indication of the level of expertise she was about to display. The target for the demonstration was positioned at 600 yards, a distance that challenged even experienced marksmen under ideal conditions. Sarah explained that successful shooting at such distances required not only technical skill but also the ability to account for multiple environmental variables that could affect bullet trajectory. She mentioned that specialized military roles often required accurate shooting at even greater distances, sometimes exceeding 1,000 yards under combat conditions. As Sarah prepared to take her shot, Mike made a casual comment to another soldier about the difficulty of shooting at such distances without extensive practice. He mentioned that he had achieved good results at similar ranges during his previous assignments but acknowledged that consistent accuracy at 600 yards required the kind of specialized training that most soldiers didn't receive. His comment was loud enough for Sarah to hear, though she showed no reaction to his assessment of the challenge she was about to attempt. Sarah took her position behind the rifle with the smooth efficiency of someone who had performed this routine thousands of times before. Her breathing became controlled and rhythmic, her body settled into perfect alignment with the weapon, and her focus narrowed to the precise calculations required for the shot. The group of soldiers watched with respectful attention, understanding that they were about to witness a demonstration of skills that few of them possessed at this level. The shot echoed across the range with the sharp report that characterized high-powered precision rifles. Before the sound had fully faded, Sarah was already adjusting her scope for a follow-up shot, moving with the kind of calm efficiency that suggested complete confidence in her first shot's accuracy. She fired 2 additional rounds in quick succession, each shot separated by barely enough time for her to make minor adjustments based on the previous bullet's impact. When the targets were retrieved and examined, the results were remarkable even by the standards of experienced soldiers. Sarah's 3 shots had created a grouping that could have been covered by a silver dollar, with each bullet hole positioned within inches of the exact center of the target. The accuracy was impressive enough to draw appreciative comments from several soldiers who recognized the level of skill required to achieve such precision at that distance. Mike was genuinely surprised by the quality of Sarah's shooting, though he attributed her success to the obvious advantages provided by specialized equipment and ideal range conditions. He made a comment suggesting that the custom rifle and controlled environment made such accuracy much easier to achieve than it would be under field conditions. He added that while the demonstration was impressive, real-world shooting scenarios rarely provided the luxury of perfect conditions and unlimited time for careful preparation. Sarah listened to Mike's analysis without comment, though several other soldiers noticed a slight change in her expression that suggested she might have more to say about real-world shooting scenarios than she was choosing to share. Instead of responding to Mike's comments, she began packing up her equipment and preparing to conclude the morning training session. Her movements remained efficient and professional, but those who knew her well would have recognized subtle signs of increased focus that often preceded significant developments. As the group prepared to leave the range, Sarah announced that the afternoon session would include more advanced exercises designed to test shooting skills under challenging conditions. She explained that soldiers interested in specialized roles would need to demonstrate proficiency with equipment similar to what they had seen in the morning demonstration, and that the afternoon exercises would provide opportunities for individuals to attempt similar long-distance shooting with appropriate supervision and instruction. Mike immediately volunteered to participate in the afternoon exercises, expressing confidence that his experience would translate well to the kind of precision shooting Sarah had demonstrated. Several other soldiers also indicated interest, though some admitted that they felt intimidated by the level of accuracy they had witnessed. Sarah noted each volunteer's name and mentioned that the afternoon session would include both instruction in advanced techniques and individual assessments of long-range shooting capability. During the lunch break, Mike found himself the center of attention as other soldiers discussed the morning's demonstration and speculated about the specialized units that operated from Fort Braxton. Mike shared his knowledge about elite military sniper programs and explained the kind of training and selection processes that typically led to such specialized roles. He mentioned that while Lieutenant Chen had demonstrated good shooting skills, the real test would be performing under pressure and in realistic field conditions rather than in the controlled environment of a training range. The conversation revealed that several soldiers were beginning to reassess their initial impressions of Sarah's capabilities, though Mike remained convinced that her quiet demeanor and administrative role indicated limited field experience. He suggested that her shooting skills, while impressive, probably reflected specialized training for her instructional duties rather than experience in actual combat operations. His analysis seemed reasonable to the other soldiers, who respected his experience and leadership within their group. Sarah spent the lunch break in her office, reviewing the personnel files of the soldiers who had volunteered for afternoon training and preparing the specific exercises she would use to evaluate their advanced marksmanship potential. She also made several phone calls to arrange for additional equipment and to coordinate with range safety personnel about the use of longer distance targets that would be required for the afternoon session. Her preparations were thorough and methodical, reflecting the same attention to detail that characterized all aspects of her professional work. When the group reconvened for the afternoon session, Sarah led them to a different section of the training facility that featured targets at distances ranging from 400 to 800 yards. She explained that the exercises would progressively increase in difficulty, starting with shots that most experienced soldiers could reasonably attempt and advancing to distances that required specialized techniques and equipment. Each soldier would have multiple opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities, and Sarah would provide individual instruction based on their performance and potential. The afternoon began with shooting exercises at 400 yards using the soldiers' personal weapons. Most of the experienced soldiers, including Mike, performed reasonably well at this distance, though none achieved the level of precision that Sarah had demonstrated earlier. She moved between the shooting positions, offering technical advice and helping soldiers make adjustments to improve their accuracy. Her instruction was patient and knowledgeable, focusing on the specific techniques required for successful long-distance shooting. As the exercises progressed to longer distances, the difficulty increased significantly. At 600 yards, only a few soldiers were able to achieve consistent accuracy, and even Mike found that his performance was less reliable than he had expected. The combination of distance, wind conditions, and the pressure of being evaluated under Sarah's watchful eye created challenges that tested the limits of his experience and confidence. Sarah observed each soldier's performance with the analytical focus of someone evaluating potential rather than simply recording scores. She made detailed notes about each individual's technique, attitude under pressure, and ability to incorporate instruction and make adjustments. Her assessments went beyond simple marksmanship to include factors like emotional control, attention to detail, and willingness to acknowledge limitations and accept guidance for improvement. When the group reached the 800-yard targets, Sarah announced that she would provide another demonstration before allowing volunteers to attempt shots at this extreme distance. She explained that successful shooting at such ranges required not only technical expertise but also the kind of mental discipline and physical control that came from extensive training and experience. The demonstration would illustrate the level of performance expected from soldiers who aspired to specialized roles within elite units. As Sarah prepared for her demonstration at 800 yards, a subtle tension began to build among the assembled soldiers. The distance was formidable even for experienced marksmen, and the afternoon wind had picked up enough to create additional challenges that would test the limits of both equipment and skill. Mike watched Sarah's preparations with growing skepticism, convinced that her earlier success had been largely due to favorable conditions and specialized equipment rather than exceptional ability. Sarah's rifle setup for the extended distance shot was even more meticulous than her previous demonstrations. She spent several minutes calculating wind drift, checking atmospheric pressure readings from a handheld device, and making precise adjustments to her scope that reflected a deep understanding of ballistics and environmental factors. Her movements were deliberate and confident, suggesting that this level of preparation was routine rather than exceptional for her shooting requirements. The target at 800 yards appeared impossibly small through standard optics, barely visible as a distinct shape against the backdrop of the range's far boundary. Sarah explained to the watching soldiers that successful shots at this distance required accounting for bullet drop of over 20 feet, wind drift that could vary significantly between the firing position and the target, and timing considerations that took into account the several seconds of flight time required for the bullet to reach its destination. Mike made a quiet comment to another soldier suggesting that while the technical explanation was interesting, real combat situations rarely provided the luxury of extensive calculations and perfect equipment setups. He mentioned that his own combat experience had taught him that quick, instinctive shooting under pressure was often more valuable than elaborate precision techniques that required ideal conditions. His comment was intended to put Sarah's demonstration into what he considered proper perspective, emphasizing practical field skills over range performance. Sarah overheard Mike's comment but chose not to respond directly. Instead, she continued her methodical preparation while explaining to the entire group that different military missions required different types of shooting skills. She mentioned that while rapid engagement of close targets was indeed crucial in many combat scenarios, other missions required the ability to neutralize threats at extreme distances where detection by enemy forces would compromise entire operations and endanger multiple lives. The explanation provided insight into the kind of specialized missions that justified the extreme precision techniques Sarah was demonstrating, though she offered no details about specific operations or personal experience with such scenarios. Mike interpreted her general discussion as theoretical knowledge gained through instructor training rather than practical experience gained through actual field operations. He remained convinced that her expertise was primarily academic rather than operational. Sarah settled into her shooting position with the same calm efficiency she had displayed earlier, though the increased distance and challenging conditions created a more demanding technical environment. Her breathing pattern became even more controlled, and her body alignment achieved the kind of perfect stability that comes from years of practice under various conditions. The watching soldiers could sense the increased concentration required for the shot, even if they didn't fully understand the technical complexities involved. The shot seemed to hang in the air longer than the previous demonstrations, the sound echoing across the extended range as the bullet traveled toward its distant target. Sarah remained motionless behind her rifle for several seconds after firing, maintaining perfect position while the bullet completed its flight. Her stillness suggested confidence in the shot's accuracy, though the extreme distance made immediate visual confirmation impossible without optical aids. When the target was finally retrieved and examined, the result was even more impressive than the morning's demonstration. Despite the challenging conditions and extreme distance, Sarah's bullet had struck within 2 inches of the target's center, achieving a level of precision that would have been remarkable even under ideal circumstances. The accuracy demonstrated skills that clearly placed her among the elite marksmen in the military, regardless of her quiet demeanor and unassuming appearance. Mike was genuinely surprised by the quality of Sarah's shooting at the extended distance, though he struggled to reconcile her obvious technical skills with his assumptions about her limited field experience. He made a comment suggesting that while the shot was indeed impressive, it represented the kind of specialized skill that was primarily useful in very specific circumstances rather than general military operations. His analysis implied that such precision, while notable, had limited practical application in the broader context of military service. Sarah listened to Mike's assessment with the same professional composure she had maintained throughout the training session, though several observant soldiers noticed that her expression had become more focused and alert. She began packing her equipment with the same methodical efficiency she had displayed all day, but there was something in her movements that suggested the afternoon's developments had captured her full attention in a way that went beyond routine training responsibilities. As the formal training session concluded, several soldiers approached Sarah to ask questions about the techniques they had observed and to express interest in additional instruction. She answered their questions with detailed technical explanations and offered to schedule individual coaching sessions for those who wanted to develop their long-range shooting capabilities. Her willingness to provide additional training reflected genuine commitment to helping soldiers improve their skills, regardless of their current ability levels. Mike lingered near the equipment area as other soldiers dispersed, partly out of professional curiosity and partly because he was beginning to recognize that his initial assessment of Sarah might have been incomplete. He had witnessed shooting skills that clearly exceeded typical military training, and he was curious about the background and experience that had produced such capabilities. However, his approach to gaining this information reflected his continued assumption that he was dealing with someone whose expertise was primarily theoretical. Mike began a conversation with Sarah by complimenting her shooting and asking about the specialized training programs that had developed her marksmanship skills. His questions were phrased in a way that assumed she had gained her expertise through instructor courses and specialized schools rather than operational experience. He mentioned his own combat tours and suggested that he would be interested in learning more about precision techniques that might enhance his effectiveness in future field assignments. Sarah responded to Mike's questions with the same professional courtesy she had shown throughout the day, providing general information about advanced marksmanship training while avoiding specific details about her own background or experience. Her answers were knowledgeable and helpful, but they maintained the same reserved quality that had characterized all her interactions with the new soldiers. She seemed content to let others make their own assumptions about her experience and qualifications. As their conversation continued, Mike's confidence in his own assessment of Sarah's background began to influence his approach to the discussion. He started sharing stories from his combat experience, describing tactical situations where quick shooting decisions had been crucial for mission success and soldier survival. His stories were intended partly to establish his own credibility and partly to provide context for what he considered the practical applications of marksmanship skills in real-world scenarios. Sarah listened to Mike's stories with apparent interest, asking appropriate questions and making comments that demonstrated her understanding of the tactical concepts he described. However, her questions often focused on technical details that surprised Mike with their sophistication and insight. She asked about specific weapon systems, ammunition types, and environmental conditions in ways that suggested deeper knowledge of combat operations than he had expected from someone he assumed had limited field experience. During their conversation, another soldier approached to ask Sarah about scheduling additional training sessions. The soldier mentioned that he had heard from other personnel that Lieutenant Chen was considered one of the top instructors on the base and that soldiers often requested specific training sessions with her when preparing for specialized assignments. The comment provided Mike with new information about Sarah's reputation among soldiers who had worked with her longer than the newly arrived transfers. Mike was beginning to realize that his initial impressions might have been based on incomplete information, though he remained convinced that Sarah's expertise was primarily instructional rather than operational. He decided to probe more directly about her background by asking about her previous assignments and the experience that had led to her current training role. His questions were polite but persistent, reflecting his growing curiosity about the apparent contradiction between Sarah's quiet demeanor and her obvious technical competence. Sarah's responses to Mike's more direct questions remained professionally appropriate but notably vague about specific details of her previous assignments. She mentioned that she had served in various roles before coming to Fort Braxton but declined to elaborate on the nature of those assignments or the operations she might have been involved with. Her reluctance to discuss her background could have been interpreted as either modesty about routine assignments or discretion about classified operations. The conversation was interrupted when Colonel Patterson approached the training area to check on the afternoon session's progress. He greeted Sarah with obvious respect and asked about the performance of the new transfers during their advanced marksmanship assessments. His interaction with Sarah suggested a professional relationship based on mutual respect and shared understanding of operational requirements that went beyond typical instructor-student dynamics. Colonel Patterson's presence provided Mike with an opportunity to observe how Sarah's superiors regarded her professional capabilities. The colonel spoke with Sarah as an equal, discussing technical aspects of the training program and seeking her recommendations about individual soldiers' potential for advanced assignments. Their conversation included references to specialized programs and operational requirements that suggested Sarah's role at the base involved more than basic instruction duties. After Colonel Patterson left to attend to other responsibilities, Mike found himself reconsidering his assumptions about Sarah's background and experience level. The respect shown by her commanding officer, combined with the sophisticated technical knowledge she had displayed, suggested that his initial assessment might have significantly underestimated her qualifications and military experience. However, he remained puzzled by her reluctance to discuss her background or emphasize her obvious competence. As the afternoon training session officially concluded, Sarah began the process of securing equipment and preparing the range for the next day's activities. Mike offered to assist with the cleanup, partly out of courtesy and partly because he hoped the additional time might provide opportunities for further conversation about her background and experience. His offer was accepted graciously, and they worked together to organize equipment and complete the necessary administrative tasks. While they worked, Mike continued his attempts to learn more about Sarah's military background, though his approach became increasingly direct as his curiosity grew. He asked specific questions about her previous assignments, the training she had received, and the operational experience that had developed her obvious expertise. His persistence reflected both genuine professional interest and growing recognition that his initial assumptions had been based on incomplete and possibly inaccurate information. Sarah's responses became more guarded as Mike's questions became more specific and persistent. She deflected direct inquiries about her operational background while continuing to provide helpful information about technical aspects of marksmanship and training procedures. Her evasiveness could have been interpreted as either appropriate discretion about classified assignments or reluctance to discuss limited experience, and Mike was unable to determine which interpretation was accurate based on her carefully controlled responses. The tension between Mike's curiosity and Sarah's discretion was beginning to create an undercurrent of professional friction that neither acknowledged directly but both seemed to recognize. Mike's growing awareness that he might have misjudged Sarah's capabilities was coupled with frustration about his inability to get clear answers about her background. Sarah, meanwhile, seemed content to let Mike draw his own conclusions while maintaining her professional composure and continuing to perform her duties with the same quiet competence she had displayed throughout the day. The next morning brought an unexpected development that would forever change the dynamic between Mike Rodriguez and Sarah Chen. Colonel Patterson had received orders for an emergency training exercise that would test the new transfer's ability to perform under realistic field conditions. The exercise was designed to evaluate their readiness for potential assignment to specialized units within Fort Braxton's operational structure, and it would require skills that went far beyond basic marksmanship and standard military procedures. Sarah arrived at the briefing room earlier than usual, carrying files and equipment that suggested she would play a significant role in the day's activities. Her demeanor was more focused than usual, reflecting the increased stakes and complexity of the emergency exercise. She spent time reviewing personnel files and making notes that would guide her assessment of each soldier's performance under the challenging conditions they were about to face. Mike entered the briefing room with his typical confidence, though he was curious about the sudden change in schedule and the emphasis on emergency procedures. He had participated in numerous training exercises throughout his career and felt prepared for whatever challenges the day might present. His experience with combat operations had taught him to adapt quickly to changing circumstances, and he was eager to demonstrate his capabilities in scenarios that would test practical skills rather than theoretical knowledge. Colonel Patterson began the briefing by explaining that the exercise had been designed to simulate conditions similar to those encountered in specialized military operations where standard procedures and equipment might not be adequate for mission success. He emphasized that the training would evaluate not only technical skills but also judgment, adaptability, and performance under stress. The soldiers would be assessed individually and, as a team, with results contributing to decisions about their suitability for advanced assignments. The exercise scenario involved a simulated rescue operation in hostile territory where the team would need to locate and extract a friendly operative while avoiding detection by enemy forces. The operation would require advanced reconnaissance skills, precise coordination, and the ability to neutralize threats at long distances without compromising the team's position. Success would depend on each soldier's ability to perform their specialized role while maintaining overall mission security. Sarah's role in the exercise was explained as that of overwatch and long-range threat elimination. Colonel Patterson described her position as critical to the mission's success, since her ability to provide accurate covering fire from concealed positions would determine whether the team could complete their objectives without sustaining casualties. He mentioned that her performance would be monitored by senior officers who were evaluating the effectiveness of new training protocols. Mike listened to the briefing with growing interest, particularly regarding Sarah's assigned role in the exercise. The description of her responsibilities suggested capabilities that went far beyond the instructional duties he had assumed represented her primary qualifications. He began to recognize that his assessment of her background might have been based on incomplete information, though he remained uncertain about the extent of her actual field experience and operational capabilities. The exercise began with the team being transported to a remote section of the base that had been configured to simulate hostile terrain. The area featured varied elevation, natural and artificial cover, and multiple concealed positions that would challenge the soldiers' reconnaissance and tactical movement skills. Electronic targets and monitoring equipment would record their performance throughout the operation, providing detailed data for post-exercise analysis and evaluation. Sarah's position for the exercise was established on elevated ground approximately 1,000 yards from the primary operational area. Her location provided clear sight lines to multiple target areas while offering natural concealment that would allow her to remain undetected throughout the mission. The distance exceeded anything the other soldiers had attempted during their training, requiring skills and equipment that represented the highest levels of military marksmanship capability. As the exercise began, Mike and the other team members moved carefully through the simulated hostile territory, using cover and concealment techniques to avoid electronic detection systems that represented enemy surveillance capabilities. Their objective was to locate the simulated friendly operative and establish a secure extraction route while avoiding engagement with superior enemy forces. Success required coordination, stealth, and the confidence that long-range overwatch would eliminate threats before they could compromise the mission. The first critical moment came when the team encountered an electronic target system representing enemy sentries positioned to detect their approach to the objective area. The targets were placed at ranges between 600 and 800 yards from Sarah's position, requiring precision shooting that would neutralize the threats without alerting other enemy forces to the team's presence. The scenario demanded perfect accuracy on the first shot, since missed shots or multiple engagements would simulate alarm conditions that would compromise the entire operation. Sarah's first shot eliminated the primary target at 750 yards, the electronic system registering a direct hit that would have been immediately fatal in actual combat conditions. Her second shot, taken less than 30 seconds later, neutralized a secondary target at 620 yards with the same lethal precision. The rapid succession of accurate shots at extreme distances demonstrated capabilities that clearly exceeded standard military training and suggested extensive experience with similar real-world scenarios. Mike, monitoring the exercise through his communications equipment, was amazed by the precision and timing of Sarah's shooting. The targets had been eliminated so quickly and efficiently that his team had been able to continue their advance without interruption or compromise. He began to realize that Sarah's capabilities represented a level of expertise that placed her among the elite operators he had heard about but never worked with directly during his previous assignments. The exercise continued with increasing complexity as the team approached the extraction point where additional threats required elimination before the mission could be completed successfully. Sarah's position allowed her to engage targets that the ground team couldn't see or reach, providing crucial support that enabled them to complete objectives that would have been impossible without her contribution. Her shooting continued to demonstrate remarkable consistency and accuracy even as ranges and environmental conditions varied throughout the operation. During one particularly challenging phase of the exercise, Mike's team became pinned down by simulated enemy fire that prevented them from advancing to their final objective. The scenario required Sarah to engage multiple targets in rapid succession while the ground team maneuvered to exploit the windows of opportunity her shooting would create. The coordination demanded split-second timing and absolute confidence in her ability to neutralize threats without endangering friendly forces operating in close proximity to the targets. Sarah's performance during this critical phase exceeded even the high expectations established by her previous demonstrations. She engaged 6 targets at ranges between 400 and 900 yards, eliminating each threat with single shots fired in a sequence that lasted less than 2 minutes. The precision and speed of her engagement allowed Mike's team to complete their advance and secure the extraction point exactly as planned, achieving total mission success through teamwork that showcased the highest levels of military professionalism and capability. As the exercise concluded and the teams assembled for debriefing, Mike found himself looking at Sarah with entirely new understanding and respect. Her performance had demonstrated skills that clearly placed her among the most capable soldiers he had ever worked with, regardless of her quiet demeanor and unassuming appearance. He realized that his initial assumptions about her background and experience had been not merely incorrect but embarrassingly naive. Colonel Patterson conducted the post-exercise debriefing with obvious satisfaction about the team's performance and the successful demonstration of advanced training protocols. He praised the ground team's tactical execution while paying particular attention to Sarah's contribution to the mission's success. His comments about her shooting revealed that the morning's performance was considered routine for her rather than exceptional, suggesting that her capabilities included even more advanced skills than the exercise had required. During the debriefing, Colonel Patterson mentioned that the exercise had been observed by senior officers who were evaluating soldiers for potential assignment to classified programs that required the highest levels of skill and security clearance. He indicated that several team members had demonstrated performance that warranted consideration for such assignments, though specific details about these programs remained confidential pending further evaluation and clearance procedures. Mike listened to the debriefing with growing awareness that he had completely misjudged not only Sarah's capabilities but also the nature of operations conducted from Fort Braxton. The exercise had provided a glimpse into missions and requirements that went far beyond anything he had experienced during his previous assignments. He began to understand that his transfer to Fort Braxton represented an opportunity to work at levels of military operations that he had previously only heard about through rumors and speculation. After the formal debriefing concluded, Mike approached Sarah with genuine humility and respect, acknowledging that his initial assessment of her capabilities had been completely wrong. He expressed appreciation for her professional skill and apologized for any comments or assumptions that might have seemed dismissive of her obvious expertise. His recognition of his mistake was forthright and sincere, reflecting the kind of character that had earned him respect throughout his military career despite his tendency toward overconfidence. Sarah accepted Mike's apology graciously, acknowledging that first impressions could often be misleading and that her quiet demeanor sometimes created misunderstandings about her background and experience. She explained that her reluctance to discuss her previous assignments was due to security requirements rather than modesty about routine duties. Her response suggested that the morning's exercise represented only a small demonstration of capabilities developed through assignments that remained classified at the highest levels of military intelligence. Their conversation after the exercise marked the beginning of a professional relationship based on mutual respect and accurate understanding of each other's capabilities and experience. Mike recognized that Sarah's expertise could contribute significantly to his own professional development, while Sarah acknowledged that Mike's combat experience and leadership abilities would be valuable assets for future operations that might require diverse skills and backgrounds. The day's events had transformed Mike's understanding not only of Sarah's capabilities but also of the opportunities available to soldiers who could demonstrate the highest levels of performance and professional development. He realized that his transfer to Fort Braxton represented a chance to advance his military career in directions he had never previously considered possible. The exercise had revealed that his previous experience, while valuable, was only the foundation for potentially much more advanced and challenging assignments. As they prepared to leave the training area, Sarah mentioned that soldiers who showed promise during exercises like the morning scenario were often invited to participate in advanced training programs that could lead to assignment with specialized units. She suggested that Mike's performance during the exercise, combined with his previous experience and leadership abilities, might qualify him for consideration for such programs if he was interested in pursuing more challenging and demanding military roles. Mike expressed immediate interest in learning more about these advanced opportunities, recognizing that they represented the kind of professional advancement he had hoped to achieve by transferring to Fort Braxton. Sarah offered to provide him with information about the application and selection processes for specialized programs, while emphasizing that such assignments required not only exceptional skill but also the highest levels of character, judgment, and security reliability. The conversation concluded with both soldiers having gained new understanding and respect for each other's capabilities and character. Mike had learned that assumptions based on appearances and initial impressions could be dangerously misleading, while Sarah had recognized that experienced soldiers like Mike could adapt quickly to new information and acknowledge their mistakes with the kind of professional integrity that was essential for advanced military operations. 3 weeks after the exercise that had fundamentally changed Mike Rodriguez's understanding of Lieutenant Sarah Chen's capabilities, an unexpected development would provide him with the full context of just how dramatically he had misjudged the quiet officer who had become his most valuable mentor at Fort Braxton. The revelation would come not through formal briefings or training exercises, but through a series of events that would expose the true depth of Sarah's operational background and the significance of the respect she commanded throughout the military intelligence community. The morning began like any other, with Sarah conducting advanced marksmanship training for a select group of soldiers who had qualified for specialized instruction based on their performance in recent exercises. Mike had become a regular participant in these sessions, his initial arrogance replaced by genuine humility and eagerness to learn from someone whose expertise he had come to recognize as extraordinary. Their professional relationship had evolved into one of mutual respect, with Sarah serving as both instructor and mentor for Mike's continued development. During the training session, Sarah received an urgent communication through her secure radio system, the kind of encrypted message that typically indicated developing situations requiring immediate specialized response. She listened to the transmission with focused attention, her expression becoming increasingly serious as she absorbed whatever information was being conveyed. After confirming her receipt of the message, she began making preparations that suggested the routine training day was about to be interrupted by operational requirements. Sarah approached Mike and the other soldiers participating in the advanced training, explaining that she had been called away for urgent duties and that the scheduled training would need to be postponed until further notice. Her manner was professional but clearly indicated the seriousness of whatever situation had developed. She gathered her equipment with the kind of efficient urgency that reflected extensive experience with emergency deployments and time-critical operations. Mike offered to assist with equipment preparation, partly out of courtesy and partly because he had developed genuine concern for Sarah's welfare during their weeks of working together. As he helped her organize gear, he noticed items that went far beyond standard military equipment. Her deployment kit included specialized communication systems, advanced navigation equipment, and weapon modifications that suggested preparation for missions requiring capabilities at the highest levels of military operations. Before departing, Sarah briefly explained that she would be unavailable for several days due to operational requirements that she couldn't discuss in detail. She arranged for other instructors to continue the advanced training program and left specific instructions for each soldier's continued development based on their individual strengths and areas needing improvement. Her preparation was thorough and methodical, ensuring that her temporary absence wouldn't disrupt the soldiers' progress toward their training objectives. Mike watched Sarah's departure with growing awareness that her operational duties extended far beyond the training responsibilities he had observed during his time at Fort Braxton. Her equipment, communication systems, and the urgency of her deployment suggested involvement in missions that operated at classification levels he had never encountered during his previous military experience. He began to understand that her role as a training instructor was only one aspect of much broader operational responsibilities. During the following days, Mike and the other soldiers continued their training under alternative instruction, though the absence of Sarah's expertise was immediately apparent in both the quality of technical guidance and the depth of tactical knowledge available for advanced concepts. The substitute instructors were competent professionals, but they lacked the specialized experience and intuitive understanding that had made Sarah's instruction uniquely valuable for soldiers aspiring to elite operational roles. On the third day after Sarah's departure, Colonel Patterson approached Mike with a request that would provide unexpected insight into the true nature of Sarah's military background and operational significance. The colonel explained that he needed Mike to assist with a special briefing for visiting officials who were conducting a review of Fort Braxton's training programs and operational capabilities. The briefing would require someone familiar with recent training developments who could speak knowledgeably about the effectiveness of current instruction methods. The briefing was conducted in a high-security conference room that Mike had never accessed before, suggesting that the visiting officials held clearances and responsibilities that exceeded his previous exposure to classified military operations. The attendees included senior officers from multiple branches of the military, representatives from intelligence agencies, and officials whose affiliations weren't clearly identified but whose presence suggested involvement in the most sensitive areas of national security operations. During the briefing, the discussion turned to the effectiveness of advanced marksmanship training programs and their contribution to developing soldiers capable of supporting specialized missions. Colonel Patterson praised the recent improvements in training outcomes, crediting much of the success to instruction methods developed and implemented by Lieutenant Chen. His comments about Sarah's contributions revealed levels of expertise and operational experience that Mike had never suspected despite their weeks of working together. One of the visiting officials asked specific questions about Lieutenant Chen's availability for consultation on a developing operational requirement that demanded her particular combination of skills and experience. The official's request was phrased in language that suggested Sarah's expertise was sought for missions operating at the highest levels of military and intelligence operations. The discussion revealed that her temporary deployment had been requested specifically because of capabilities that made her uniquely qualified for certain types of critical operations. Colonel Patterson's response to the official's inquiry provided Mike with the first clear indication of Sarah's true operational background and the significance of her reputation within the military intelligence community. The colonel explained that Lieutenant Chen was currently deployed on a classified mission that utilized her specialized skills, but that her availability for additional assignments would depend on the duration and requirements of her current operational commitments. The colonel then provided background information about Sarah's career that completely transformed Mike's understanding of the quiet officer he had come to know as an instructor and mentor. Sarah had served multiple tours with classified special operations units, participating in missions that remained hidden from public knowledge and often from most military personnel. Her sniper capabilities had been developed through extensive combat experience in environments where the margin for error was measured in lives rather than training scores. According to Colonel Patterson's briefing, Sarah's confirmed elimination record included over 40 high-value targets across 3 different theaters of operation, with engagements ranging from 400 to over 1,200 yards under combat conditions that would challenge the world's most skilled marksmen. Her longest confirmed elimination had been achieved at a distance of 1,320 yards in mountainous terrain under adverse weather conditions, a shot that had prevented a terrorist attack that could have killed hundreds of innocent civilians. The briefing revealed that Sarah's quiet demeanor and preference for avoiding attention reflected both natural personality traits and operational security requirements that came with her specialized role in the military's most sensitive missions. Her reluctance to discuss her background wasn't modesty about routine assignments, but necessary discretion about operations that remained classified at levels requiring special compartmented information clearances that most military personnel never accessed throughout their entire careers. Mike listened to these revelations with a mixture of amazement, respect, and profound embarrassment about his initial assumptions regarding Sarah's capabilities and experience. He realized that his casual dismissal of her qualifications had been based not merely on incomplete information, but on a fundamental misunderstanding of how elite military operations actually functioned and how the most capable operators often deliberately maintained low profiles to protect both their effectiveness and their security. The briefing continued with additional details about Sarah's contributions to various classified programs, including her role in training other special operations personnel and her development of advanced techniques that had been adopted throughout the military's elite units. Her expertise was sought not only for operational missions but also for the kind of specialized instruction that could prepare other soldiers for the most demanding and dangerous assignments available within the military structure. As the briefing concluded, Mike began to understand that his relationship with Sarah represented an extraordinary opportunity to learn from someone whose operational experience placed her among the most elite soldiers in the entire military. Her willingness to serve as his mentor despite his initial arrogance and misconceptions reflected both professional dedication and personal character that explained why she was respected at the highest levels of military and intelligence operations. During the days that followed the briefing, Mike reflected extensively on the lessons learned from his experience with Sarah Chen. He realized that his tendency to judge capabilities based on appearances and assumptions had nearly caused him to miss the most valuable learning opportunity of his military career. The experience taught him that true expertise often came without fanfare or self-promotion, and that the most dangerous operators were frequently those who attracted the least attention to their capabilities. When Sarah returned from her deployment 10 days later, Mike approached her with a completely transformed understanding of their professional relationship and the extraordinary privilege he had been given to learn from someone of her caliber. He expressed genuine gratitude for her patience with his initial misconceptions and asked how he could best take advantage of the remaining time in their training program to develop his own capabilities toward the standards she represented. Sarah's response reflected the same professional grace she had maintained throughout their relationship, acknowledging Mike's growth while emphasizing that his own experience and potential warranted serious development regardless of past misunderstandings. She explained that his combat experience, combined with the training he had received at Fort Braxton, qualified him for consideration for advanced programs that could lead to assignments similar to those she had described in general terms during their previous conversations. Over the following weeks, Sarah provided Mike with specialized instruction that went far beyond standard military training, sharing techniques and insights developed through years of operational experience at the highest levels of military effectiveness. Her teaching reflected not only technical expertise but also the kind of tactical wisdom that could only be gained through extensive experience in situations where performance meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The relationship between Mike Rodriguez and Sarah Chen had evolved from his initial arrogance and misconceptions to become one of the most valuable professional partnerships of both their military careers. Mike had learned humility, respect, and the importance of recognizing expertise regardless of its packaging, while Sarah had found in Mike a student whose character and potential warranted the investment of her knowledge and experience. Their story became a testament to the power of personal growth, professional respect, and the recognition that true capability often comes in unexpected forms. The lessons learned from their relationship extended far beyond individual professional development to influence how both soldiers approached their interactions with colleagues throughout their continued military service. Mike never again allowed assumptions about appearance or demeanor to influence his assessment of others' capabilities, while Sarah's experience with his transformation reinforced her belief in the importance of patient mentorship and the potential for growth that exists within every soldier willing to acknowledge their limitations and commit to improvement. Their story became part of Fort Braxton's unofficial training curriculum, serving as a reminder to all personnel that respect, humility, and open-mindedness were essential qualities for success in military operations where lives often depended on the accurate assessment of teammates' capabilities and the effective utilization of diverse skills and experience levels. The quiet lieutenant and the confident sergeant had taught each other lessons that would influence their effectiveness and character throughout the remainder of their military careers and beyond.